Alright, I'm getting ready to put the alarm in. Now, as a rule, a lot of these wires are really not needed, so it can be intimidating at times. But I have noticed that they've made a lot of changes. As they start adding things, they start to do more color coding, like on here for instance. So if you find something that has a red plug, 3-prong, there's a 3-prong. There's another red one, but that's not a 3-prong. Okay, so you look. Okay, there it is right there. Okay, so they kind of guide you through and make it relatively simple as far as what plugs go where. Now, years ago when I had my store, now even though I had a store back in the mid to late 80s into the early 90s, and I installed these, myself as well. Just because I owned the place doesn't mean I didn't work. You work harder, actually. But they never really color-coded things. They ran everything out of one harness of wire, and you had to start going cuckoo as to what was what. Now, they would take, for instance, a green wire. In this case, they have a green and a green with a black stripe. Well, that's how they would kind of designate the colors to help with these. You may have, a green with a white stripe, a green with a black stripe, a purple with a black stripe. Hard to find sometimes. A black with a purple stripe. Again, hard to find sometimes. So they've made it a lot easier as far as module-wise. Now, I'm kind of thinking, I don't care too much about the shock sensor. Now, do I want it? Yes, it's nice to have, but you know what? They can be a pain in the ass. I've had shock sensors on my alarms to where you're always readjusting them because of the the area. And like even myself, but sometimes a customer would come in and says, "I want it sensitive." Well, if I make it too sensitive, sir, every time a car goes by, it's going to go off. I don't care. I want it sensitive. Do you make it sensitive? The next day, because he was up all night turning his alarm off, it's too sensitive. So after 3 or 4 attempts of this guy coming back, or a customer, to try to get it to his liking, you finally say, well, listen, here's the screwdriver. This is where you do it, clockwise, counterclockwise. They can be a pain in the butt. So normally if I run a shock sensor, I crank it up, desensitize it. Alright, I want it so that if you hit the truck with a car door, it's not going to go off. You're in the parking lot, I'm inside, my alarm goes off because somebody hit my truck with their car door. Next thing I know, this thing is beeping. What am I going to do? I'm going to be running like hell to get out to the truck thinking somebody broke into it. See what I mean? Sometimes they're not really worth what they are. So I run them tight, in other words, you really got to do damage. You really got to break that window. And even then, if it starts to act up, I'll just disconnect it completely. I leave nothing on the seats to where they can break a window and rob what's in the car. Now, granted, the quicker the alarm goes off, the quicker it's going to deter them from going any further. So if they start to smash a window and the alarm goes off, they're going to probably run at that point. Where if they break a window, the window's broke, regardless the window's already broke, so it's not going to prevent that from happening. But they break a window, they're going to have to break the window to open the door, unlock the door. So now once they open the door, the alarm goes off. Now, that's where it gets kind of touchy, because once the door is open, if there is something within their reach from within the car, once they're in the car, they have time to grab it. So the shock sensors sometimes is a pretty good deterrent to stop them from even getting into the car. It's not going to stop them from breaking the window, not unless they hit it the first time and it doesn't break, you know, or they bump up against the vehicle, you know. But then again, you're talking sensitivity. So it's the shock sensors are always a fine line. You know, they really are. You know, I've never really found a need to have a shock sensor, and then when I had, it was always cranked up all the way, and you know, desensitized as almost as much as possible, so that they actually had to break the window. Now that's just my way, you know. But other than that, it seems like everything is pretty well into the module portion of it. Simple. Now on the wiring side of it, which really looks, oh shit, you know, most of the time you're not using all these wires. Now in the past, in my own vehicle, I already have power door locks, so all I gotta do is tie into that. It's not a big deal. If I choose to. If not, I don't have to tie into it, but then I got to carry two remotes. Alright, so it's going to be easier to tie into it. On the other side here, it's wire. Now, as a rule, the alarms are current sensing. So you have to hook it up, one wire at least has to go to a constant hot. Another one goes to an accessory or a key hot. The one that goes to the constant hot, if you were to tie that into the fuse that operates the dome light in the car and jump that fuse size up a little bit, alright, because you don't want it to blow, because if it blows, your alarm's out. So you tie into that fuse. When the alarm senses the voltage change of that light going on or off, it will sound off. So sometimes you don't have to go totally nuts wiring into the pin switches. And even if you do, most of the cars, the pin switches are all tied together through a neutral, so that all you got to do is hit that one wire on that one switch closest to the driver's door, naturally, because that's where you're normally at, and it will act for all the switches. So you know, again, they make it kind of easy. For me, the hardest part is right now they've made some changes. It's going to be a little bit harder for me to get under the dash for two reasons. One is I'm a little overweight, and I'm trying this chest rig out today, so that's going to also possibly kind of slow me down a little bit. So that's where I'm at, and I don't know the exact wiring on the vehicle, you know, as far as what color code. They used to sell, they called it the Bible. And every year, every couple of years, they would come out with a new one. It was about 1.5 inches, 2 inches thick, about the size of a telephone book. And it would have every automobile, and then it would be listed. They actually sent me something that looks similar. If I can find it here, hold on. Alright, for instance, this here. This is Omega had it. Forget the writing, because I'm not going into that right now. But you would look in the book, and you look under Astro van, 2003 Chevy Astro van, and it would give you the wire for everything, telling you. And in this case, the red wire is the ignition switch harness, blah 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 blah. You know, white wire is the interior light. You know, and it gives you the color of the wire and what it does in your vehicle. Now I was told, now it's not worth buying that book just to do one car. However, you go to Omega and you can find it for nothing. But those books, they were about 30 bucks back then, and I heard they stopped making them because now they just put everything online. But the book was a pretty good book. It helped you out a lot in some of this stuff. Other than what I have here, I don't know the wiring codes for that van. What I have here is probably all that I'm going to need. That's why that's all they gave me. You follow me? So I'm not going to concern myself with any other wire other than the wires that are on that paper. So other than that, I'm going to kind of just feel it out, plug things in, make sure everything is where it's supposed to be, and then I will lug this whole octopus of wires out to the vehicle. But I won't do that until I drop the dash and all that kind of stuff first, because I don't want to have this in the way while I'm trying to disassemble the dashboard. All I gotta do is drop the bottom part, and as you guys know, I've had that apart a half a dozen times looking for that damn short, and it seems the short isn't there anymore for some reason, so I have no idea what that is. I'm thinking I may have had a hung up relay or something, but anyway, that's where we're at. Well, I'm getting ready to wire up this alarm. This alarm. With all of its glorious wires and such. However, I'm going to, it wants me to hook up these two wires together to a constant hot. Now these two wires look like maybe number 12. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right through the firewall and run. Seeing that I'm going through the firewall, I got to drill a hole through the firewall. I'm going to run a number 4 gauge through there. This way I have plenty of battery 12-volt wire under the dash as far as amps and volts if I need it. But whenever you're going to go under or through a firewall and go directly to the battery, you want to fuse it as close to the battery as possible. Now any grounds I'll use right at the chassis. I chassis ground everything. The battery is connected to the frame in the chassis. So why do I need to run a wire? You follow? I can go all the way to the back of the truck and get negative 12 volts of ground just by touching the frame. So there's really no sense in running 2 wires. In the long run, it can actually harm you because you want your ground short. The shorter, the better. Alright, and that's all there is to it. And then there's something called ground loops that you have to be concerned about. I'm looking for a fuse here, by the way, that what size is this one? Come on, give me a size. Give me an amp. 40 amp, that's enough. Alright. Now, as you can see, I have some with and some without. This has a little neon light in there that lets me know what's going on. So anyway, you always want to make sure that your grounds are short. And if you're going to run them, you shouldn't make them heavier. The grounds are important. The voltage, let me turn the water off there. I was just refreshing the boys' water bowl. Alright, the voltage has to get out before it can get in. And if it doesn't happen, you end up with a problem. Alright, there's also a thing called a ground loop that can start getting interfered with. So again, why should I run 2 wires, hot and ground, doubling the length and the expense anyway, alright, and then have to worry about possibly grounding or fusing the ground as well when this is all ground. The battery ground is connected to this. So anywhere on this truck, if I hooked a positive up to like a radio and took the negative and touched a truck, anywhere in the truck, the radio is going to work. This is the best ground you have going for you. Running a wire is just a waste of material, time, and it's not going to be as good. So anyway, let me get this here started and then I'll be right back to you. By the way, if you're using this type of a fuse holder, because they make different types of fuses. They make the big max fuses, which are a big blade fuse, and they have different types of holders where they just connect the wires underneath and with screws and a snap cap and everything is fine. I do have some of those inside, but I would prefer to use this one because it's a lower profile for me. When I put it up underneath here, I don't have to worry about it. And it just unscrews and you pop the glass fuse out, which is a monster fuse. However, you got to make sure when you're using this to put the sleeves on before you put the ends on, because otherwise you're going to be taking it all apart again. Now it's not a big deal, but it's time, you know, and it's just something you got to take apart. And if it took you a little while to put it in because you want to do it just right, you know, well then at that point you're going to have to take it apart and redo it again. So remember to put those little end caps on before you put the connector on. Another thing, people used to ask that, well, Jesus, when you put the bare wire in there, because what you're doing is you're stripping the wire back and you're pushing it in, and then you twist it, you know, and some will want to tin it, and basically fill it up with solder, which you can do that as well. But it's not really necessary. The bottom part of this screw is kind of like got grooves cut in it, for one. The other is you twist it nice and tight, but when you're screwing that screw in, it's not only pushing down against the wire, it's taking whatever other wire doesn't catch and it's spreading it out. So it's basically expanding the wire completely all the way around as it's being pushed down against the majority of the wire. So there's no reason to really have to tin it unless you want to. Now this is also something you want to think about, because I had just caught myself and I'm glad I did. The battery in this thing is not easy to get out. There's very little room and it's pretty tight. It actually rubs up against this when you're taking it out of there. If you had a top post, it might be almost impossible unless you started disconnecting everything. Now this is a little bit oversized, but still it's very tight. So if I took that fuse holder and put it up under there like I was going to, I'd have to take it off in order to remove the battery. Now, however, you don't remove the battery every day, but I'm not looking to make more work for myself. Nor am I always going to be the one that may change the battery. So I don't want somebody else to try to finagle it, trying to get it out through there, and either breaking this or disconnecting it or not being hooked up right. So instead of going through all that, I just soon reroute it, which I'm going to do, and I'm going to have it over in here. So it's out of everybody's way and it's still doing the job, and it's actually better off because now if you have to get to the battery or any other thing, it's not in the way. I can take the cover off the relay box, it's not in the way. So I have no problems with it being there. So that's where I'm going to put it. And I'm actually glad I remembered that. When I came through